Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. This is the second installment in my ongoing series analyzing the Passion of Jesus, or better the question of did Jesus really die on the cross, but we'll get to that question later on in the series. For now we're actually just analyzing the Passion in general. I'll be posting two links in the description section right away. The first video is to my video on the Talmud. This is sort of like the intro, prequel to this series. Please watch that if you haven't already. This will help you understand where I'm coming from, at least as using the Talmud as evidence and first century Jewish culture as not only documented in the Talmud, but in other writings as well. The other link is, of course, to the first part of the series. This is the second part. So this video is going to cover Jesus' trial before Pilate and how the Gospels portray it, and we're going to stack it up against the actual historical record. Now, we are told that after the trial before the Sanhedrin, Jesus is then brought to Pilate. Pilate is then told that the Jews want him to be crucified because he is declared himself to be the king of the Jews, i.e. that he is the Messiah, and that therefore he must be put to death because he is an instigator. Now, what's fascinating about this is that they, of course, changed the charge they've levied against Jesus. They got him on blasphemy, and if you saw my first video, you saw how that would have not been true at all. But when they bring him to Pilate, they know they have to come up with a new charge, because Pilate, not being a Jew, really doesn't care about their theology, and so therefore to say, well, he's claiming to be the Son of God, and blah, 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 and that's a crime, and we need you to kill him for that, he just would have shrugged his shoulders and said, I could care less. But no, they changed the charge on him to be that he's being an instigator. He is claiming to be a king. Of course, Jesus responds to Pilate, depending on which gospel you read, but the one that comes to my mind right away is that his kingdom is not of this world. And therefore, he's telling Pilate, I'm not a threat to you. My kingdom is not of this world. If it was so, my followers would be fighting for me. But look, they're not. Pilate on many occasions says, I find no fault with this man. Right away, Pilate is saying, listen, this guy is innocent. But the Jews, they see that Pilate's not going for it. So they say to Pilate, Pilate, if you don't, well, first off, before we get to the blackmail, they tell Pilate that according to law, they cannot put a man to death. According to the current law, they cannot put their man to death. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a bunch of BS. I have here Josephus, the histories of Josephus, in Book 14, Chapter 9, Section 3. There's a quotation here saying that when Herod Antipas' son had slain Hezekiah, those that were with him, and hath thereby transgressed our law, which hath forbidden to slay any man, even though he were a wicked man, unless he had first been condemned to suffer death by the Sanhedrin. Yet hath he been so insolent as to do this, and that without any authority from thee. End quote. The footnote by the scholar, by William Whiston, says the following: It is here worth our while to remark that none could be put to death in Judea, but by the approbation of the Jewish Sanhedrin, there being an excellent provision in the law of Moses, that even in criminal cases, and particularly when life was concerned, an appeal should lie from the lesser councils of 7 in the other cities to the Supreme Council of 71 at Jerusalem. And this is exactly according to Jesus, he says, Jesus' words when he says, quote, it could not be that a prophet should perish out of Jerusalem. So here you have the scholar who did this edition of Josephus' histories even backing up the claim that the Sanhedrin had the power to put people to death on the lips of Jesus himself. Furthermore, we are told that this is also ridiculous, and Josephus himself mentions in Book 18 of the Antiquities of the Jews, Chapter 3.3, that if you notice when he references Jesus, and I know there's a debate whether these references are authentic or not, that's not really the point of this video, but let's just pretend that they are for a second. Josephus doesn't even mention a trial before the Sanhedrin. He only mentions the trial before Pilate, which I find very interesting from a historical perspective, considering that you'd think Josephus would have mentioned some sort of fancy court hearing before the Sanhedrin. He doesn't, which in my opinion furthers the claim that the Sanhedrin trial would never have happened. It never did happen. But let's go to Pilate since we're mentioning him. Pilate therefore seems to believe that the Jews cannot put a man to death and it's his job, so therefore he agrees to flog him. Now before he agrees to flog him, let me go back to the blackmail. When Pilate says, listen, I find this man innocent, they say, Pilate, if you don't if you don't put this man to death, then we will tell Caesar that you are no friend of his. Now, they essentially try and blackmail Pilate, and he apparently gives in to them. Now, from an historical point of view, this is rather laughable. We know from Josephus and Philo that Pilate was a ruthless man, and according to Justice Cohan, and I will also post a link to the article that I'm using a lot for the beginning of this series, Justice Cohan, this Jewish scholar, former Chief Justice of of Israel, said that this is ill-conceivable. There's no way Pilate would have given in to this sort of blackmail. He was so ruthless, he didn't listen to anyone. In fact, he was so ruthless, he was fired from his post as governor of Judea because, survey says, he was too ruthless. So, to think that these Jews could just waltz up to the governor of Judea and say, haha, if you don't do this, we're going to blackmail you, seems rather ridiculous. Furthermore, apparently Pilate gives in, and he says that it's custom that they should have a choice between two people during the Passover, or during the Passover time. They can actually release a criminal back into society. According to Justice Cohan, and he cites the absence of this in Josephus, this has no historical basis whatsoever. The idea of a custom where Pilate or the Roman governor gave a prisoner free, there's no historical evidence for it whatsoever. In fact, we are told that apparently this is Justice Cohan's opinion is that this is a literary device, because why limit it to just two people? Why Barabbas or Jesus, who, by the way, according to the Greek language, or the Greek manuscripts, in Greek, of course this was changed later by scribes, Barabbas's name and Jesus' name were very similar. In English it would be Son of the Father. Both Barabbas and Jesus had very similar names. In fact, in some manuscripts they were the same. Scribes saw the problem with this because now you're actually getting confused with the narrative in its original language. Who was actually released? Was it Barabbas or was it Jesus? And so scribes in the 4th century, and Justice Cohan cites this, shows the changing of the scriptures in order to, the corruption of the scriptures, to lessen this confusion. But I'm not going with the conspiracy theory here. Of course, some people do believe that perhaps at this point it was Barabbas who was crucified and not Jesus. I'm not actually purporting that, but that's just a little bonus there. Well, apparently they go along with this custom that never actually existed in history according to the Gospels, and Barabbas is let go. This is basically a 1st century terrorist who is let go. This is like we capture Osama bin Laden and then he's let go free apparently. And Jesus, the innocent man, according to Pilate, is then handed over to be crucified. So again, if you have any doubt in what I've been saying, please see the link. I'll provide it in the description section. Another thing also I'd like to point out that this idea that, again, Justice Cohan mentions that the Sanhedrin apparently had no rights to put a man to death. Of course, Justice Cohan says that under the Pax Romana, under Augustus Caesar, and this carried on to Tiberius Caesar, that, again, every community had a right, just as long as it didn't contradict Roman law, that they had a right to put a man to death, according to Pax Romana. So this idea that the Jews couldn't put Jesus to death themselves is utterly ridiculous. Now, some people say, well, maybe it's because the Jews didn't want to be blamed for this. Well, according to the Gospel of Matthew, they screamed out, may his blood be on us and our children. So already they were indicting themselves, apparently. So what's the point? They could have just killed him and still have said, may his blood be on us and our children. But anyway. So thank you everyone for watching this installment. Again, I'll provide the links as necessary, and this will be it for now, but we will later on, I'll make the other videos at another time. We'll continue on with the actual crucifixion of Jesus and post-resurrection appearances and whether they are valid according to Jewish culture. Thank you everyone for watching. Peace be with you all.